Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Andy Ortiz, a reporter with TheWrap. We are finishing up just about week 2 of the writer strike, and we are coming up on Mother's Day this Sunday. So happy early Mother's Day to everyone, but especially some incredible women that I have with me right now. I am talking to some of the WGA moms that are on strike, getting their perspective from the picket lines and some insights into what they are really fighting for. I need to take a big inhale of oxygen right now because they have very impressive long titles. So here we go. Joining me today, I've got Liz Benjamin, who was one of the co-executive producers on Dead to Me and The Flight Attendant, among other incredible titles. We've got SaBerre Fahey, who was a story editor on Hit the Floor. Jess Pineda, who is a supervising producer on The Neighborhood. Kristen SaBerre, who was a co-EP on The 4400. Napolitano, who is a showrunner on Fire Country. We've got Yahlin Chang, a co-showrunner and EP on The Handmaid's Tale. And last but certainly not least, I've got Zoanne Clack, who is the co-showrunner and EP for Station 19 and an EP on Grey's Anatomy. Guys, you do too many things. I can't breathe. I need to just take in oh, okay. I normally start all of my interviews by asking everyone how they're doing, like genuinely, how are you doing? There are a lot of you though. So I will say just more to the room. I hope that you are all doing well. I know that this is a very chaotic time right now. So I hope that you are finding ways to keep yourself sane. We are so thrilled to be having a discussion with you today. Liz, I want to come to you first because I know that you organized the Family Day picket line at Netflix earlier this week. And you mentioned that this was important for you to do because you wanted to make it clear that you guys aren't greedy millionaire writers. You said we're hardworking people with families, and you really wanted to put a human face on this strike. What I would very much like to know is why did it feel necessary? Why did it feel necessary that you had to present that human face on the strike to the people that you are, currently negotiating with?
Well, because I think that there's a fallacy that writers make exorbitant amounts of money and we live these, high living lifestyles, and we're just not. I mean, we're really middle class, mostly middle class people right now doing a lot of work. And I wanted to, especially for friends and family who think I'm a Hollywood writer, making all this money living in Hollywood. I wanted them to really see who we are. We have published what we love, but we're also being worked to the bone. And I wanted to put a face to the families and show people who we really are and the diversity that's in our union and all the different kinds of people that make up the different kinds of families in our union. So that was important to me.
Yeah, incredible. Well, and I know, SaBerre, you were out on the picket line on Family Day. I'm really curious from your perspective how it compares to other picket lines, right? Because there's always a different element when there are kids involved, when there are families. So how did it differ? Or did it differ? I mean, what was kind of the vibe out there?
Well, it was interesting because I carried both my kids while I was an on-set writer. And then I've been home with them developing, and I just did a feature rewrite, but literally not back on a set since those times. And so bringing them out there, my kids are 5 and 8, and just kind of explaining to them, and we pulled them from school. We pulled them a half day. But I was like, this is an education. And my 4-year-old daughter was yelling, hey, how corporate creative got to go in a microphone. And I have never been so proud. I was like, I'm doing this small thing. It was very different because actually it wasn't very different, to be honest with you. It was just crazy because it was Netflix. But I've been at Disney a lot of days with Kristen, and there's tons of parents there. I have a picture of a dad with a 4-month-old, and he's at the bottle on the picket line. And he's feeding the baby, and he's pre-WGA. So it's just really important to everybody, and it's just really interesting to see how families are coming out, and not just from from all of them.
Can I just jump back in though for a second, because I think that's really important. I started in this business pregnant. My very first staff job, I found out I was pregnant, and I waited 5 months to tell my showrunner. And by then I was really showing, so it wasn't a surprise. I carried my baby to term, and then I had a short maternity leave, very nice, but short. And then I came back and did the second season of that show with a newborn. And I've never not been a mom working writer. And seeing all those families out there with strollers, babies in their arms, walking babies. It really brought back for me a lot of those same memories too of what it was like to be a new parent and to be working in this industry.
I was a writer's assistant as a mom, and I was like, I'm just so hard-headed, guys. I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this until something works out. But I remember when I would interview for jobs, I was always told, don't say you have kids, don't say you're a mom, don't say this, don't do that. I mean, I knew bosses that were very kind that would say things like, oh, she was a great writer, but then she had a baby. And I was like, what? You give birth to the world and that's not okay. And I just, my kids go to school right next to Netflix. So I literally like picked them up and a bunch of their friends came with me and they're like, yeah. And they were just so jazzed to support everybody out there. So Liz, I didn't know that you're the one who did it, man. Thank you. It was so much. You know, my daughter was like, I want to write this down in Spanish. So she would put paga mi mama. And she was like, paga mi mama. And I was like, this is great. You know, it was really empowering and very cool. And I think for my kids who are just like, yeah, whatever, they're like, whoa, this is important, you know? So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I wanted to do something that wasn't full of hate and vitriol and just was like, here we are ready to come back to the table. We are families. Like I wanted them to see us and put like I said, put a human face on this strike.
I am so fascinated by just the concept of having to explain a strike to kids, right? They're kids. They're not going to know what striking is. And at various ages, I mean, Sarah, you've got, you know, you said a 4 and an 8-year-old, their levels of understanding are going to be at different points. So Kristen, for you, I will have you start us off. How do you kind of explain this to kids when they're out there? How do you kind of like make this palatable?
So funny that you asked me. I have a 15-month-old. So if she's curious, she hasn't developed the words to ask. So I'm actually really curious what everybody else has to say, but I will just say that as a mom to a young baby, there is so much invisible work involved in raising a child. We all know this. We all know that we live in a country that doesn't even think it's work, doesn't care about paying us for that or supporting us financially for that, for all of that work. And so it is a really interesting and natural intersection that we're also here on strike to be paid for the other work that we do that is, you know, in some ways visible, in some ways not. So they really do intersect in an interesting way that I'm feeling a lot right now. Just, you know, we do so much work, and is it so much to be asked that work be visible and for us to be paid for it? So yes, my baby's very young. I can't wait to hear what everybody else says so that I can explain it to her soon. But yeah, this is a really interesting time.
But like the possibility of your 15-month-old's first words being like fair contract, that feels
right. That is absolutely yes. I love it.
I have 3. They are 10 and 8. And my son is at this, he's the 10-year-old, and he's at this, you know, they're very stereotypical boy girl for some reason. I swear I didn't do it. He is such, like, has that kind of boy energy and is into like wars and airplanes and, you know, just like he says many facts about many wars and which planes and jets were flown. And so he's all about, you know, with the strike, he's kind of all about sticking it to the man. He doesn't really know what that means, but he wants to get out there and like, make sure his mommy gets fair pay. And, you know, it's just, I've just been like, you know, we'd like to be able to, as Kristen was saying, be paid fairly for the work that we do when we're out there, and having the choice of whether, and for me, it's about whether or not I have a choice to go and do a SaBerre where I can like take some time off and be with the kids. But I do have the option to not be in the positions that I'm in, but because I'm a single mom and I'm the sole provider for these 3 children, I feel like I need to be on a show that I know is going to go and know is going to have enough episodes where I can support them in the way to which they have been used to. And that is not to say that I will not chuck it all in 5 years, because that is a plan. But for now, I would like to, I mean, I don't have really the option for me to like go and say, I want to do, you know, this wonderful television that's out there with the streamers and all of that, because even if I do get on a show, what if it's 6 episodes and then I can't support my family for the rest of the year, you know? So I'm stuck in a way that I have prepared for myself, you know. I can't do the other way, but in the way that we're being paid now, I don't feel like I have a lot of options. And, you know, I really, really enjoy my job and all of that comes with it. But, you know, someday I would like to take a break and would like to be able to be paid fairly for that change of pace.
I'll jump in on that because I came from Grey's Anatomy. You know, I came from Zoanne and I worked together for years and years. So I came from the network world and I stepped into the cable world and I was really excited. And I ran a cable show. And in the calendar year that I ran a hit show that was so much fun, I made what I made as a story editor on Grey's Anatomy, a story editor. And then I came back to network and now I have a child. I didn't before. And it's a similar predicament. You know, I want everyone to make TV across all platforms and be able to support their families in the same exact way. Like, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Oh, well, Yahlin, I want to come to you now because with all of you, you guys do such incredible things. I would really love to kind of just dispel like a couple of myths about what you guys do, because that seems to be the prevailing thing is, well, these people work in television. Well, they're just rolling in money and you're saying you got these hit shows. You're like, you're rich and you're living it up. I would love very much if you could kind of, in a way that is maybe succinct, kind of break down or give a realistic breakdown about just like the time management and the budgeting that you have to go through, especially as a mom, right? Because you got to worry about being away from your family. You got to worry about providing for that family. So how does this actually break down for you? Like, what are things that maybe people don't realize that you have to think about?
Well, I think that, you know, what the strike is really about, and, you know, speaking as a member of the negotiating committee, is that it's very hard now for writers to be able to see a way forward with the massive kind of comprehensive assault on our wages and working conditions. So, you know, there are still a few isolated spots, like in broadcast, like Zoanne is talking about, where you have 22 episodes and you're paid per episode and you're actually paid very well. But more and more, our members are finding it very hard to live in LA, to raise a family, to have a long career. You know, I see it with the lower level writers on our show. You know, we take these long hiatuses between seasons, and, you know, in the earlier seasons, they were able to kind of easily get jobs on other shows. And recently, you know, we came back after a year or so, and, you know, I asked the room what they were up to, and they hadn't been able to find jobs, which is very distressing, you know, especially for writers who are like on a hit show, you know. So I think that, you know, it's the thing that seems really unfair, I think, is that, you know, budgets for these shows over the last decade have ballooned like 50%, you know. So you have shows that were $5 million an episode that now they spend $10 million an episode. There are shows that are $20 million an episode. And the writing budget is just, writers make 23% less over the last decade than they were before, adjusted for inflation, you know. So, you know, you've got showrunners on shows who, make less than, like Tia was saying, like make the same as they made as a story editor 10 years ago. So there's just been this incredible squeeze. I mean, I spoke to a showrunner who, like an established showrunner who was on a Netflix show, who They offered him in post, post is part of your job as a showrunner, as a writer producer. They offered him half minimum to work in post. And there are countless showrunner stories I hear where showrunners, because they love their shows, they work in post for free. The studio will not pay them, and they're not going to let someone else come in and recut their show and ruin it. So they're literally like working weeks on end for free, So the ability for a writer to make a sustainable career and have a sustainable living and pay for their kids and live in LA has gotten really, really hard. And these are the writers of, shows that are extremely profitable, that make a ton of money, that will live on these platforms forever and ever. And they're not getting paid.
I met Yahlin on my very first job, which was a dream come true. I was a showrunner's assistant on Dirty Sexy Money. I had given my year and a half at CAA, which we're supposed to do to get the reference to one of their showrunner clients, but I was sitting at CAA through the strike. So then it ended, and I went to Dirty Sexy Money, and I worked for 3 years on different Berlanti shows. And then that led to a staffing job on a VH1 show. And I was lucky enough to go 4 seasons with that show with mini runs in between. So they kept us on. But when it ended, I have over 4,000 hours of set experience through my assistant years and my staffing time. And then I'm executive story editor credit. And so I have met on so many shows. I've had showrunners that I knew from the Berlanti camp wanting so badly to bring me on shows that they had, but being like, they didn't give me any budget. I only can bring on like one staff writer. I've actually had somebody ask me if I would go back to staff writer. And like, what do you do when it's a 6-week job or a 20-week job and you have kids and you have a family, and it's, I've been lucky enough to sort of diversify, but I thought this problem meant I was a failure. And meeting people on the picket line in the last 2 weeks, hundreds of people that were displaced mid-levels that had had the same experience. I mean, it was completely eye-opening.
It's a very common experience. I talk to so many writers. There's like a depression amongst writers that we're writers. So we're always in our feelings, and we think it's just us, and we're insecure. And I know so many writers that are talented writers, experienced writers, who get to this place where they think, oh, something's wrong with me because I haven't been staffed, or something's wrong with me, I guess I'm just not good enough. But it has nothing to do with their talent. There's a lot of economic forces at play. That's the reason we're striking. And I think it's a really important point for all of us to remember, is that this is nothing to do with our talent. Our talent is strong. Our talent matters. But they're trying to make us think that we don't matter. And I see that. I see the way that affects Sarah and so many, as I'm telling you, so many writers that I look up to. And I'm like, wait, no, I can't believe even you've been brought to this place. But it really is like this emotional depression amongst us that we are taking it in. We think it's our fault. We're internalizing it. And it is completely external. And it's got to change, because it's unsustainable.
I just want to jump in for a second and piggyback off the comments about editing. Okay. I know a showrunner who had a successful show for 2 years on Netflix and was paid that low wage for editing because it was considered not writing. Whereas everyone knows that editing is the 4th draft. You are writing the visually, right? So this is, an instance where the tech companies have come in and they don't understand the business, in my opinion, and they are just making up these arbitrary rules and we had a system in place that worked for years, and it worked well. And people were brought up through that system, and they understood the business. And when they reached the showrunner level, they were capable of running a show. And that is disappeared. And other thing they did while she was in editing was not pay her health insurance. So for 4 months, she had to pay her own health insurance. They wouldn't pay into the fund. any other profession, if you asked a doctor, I just want you to do this one surgery, it's not really in your area of it's not really considered like, or I want you to do rug treatment, and I want you to do it for free because, you should do it for free because it's your name on the line or whatever. Like, no other profession, the legal profession. You think a lawyer would put up with this? Some people are at the top of their game. They have worked their entire career to get there. They are at the pinnacle, the place that you dream of getting to be a showrunner. And there's no financial compensation for that anymore. They're not being treated with the respect that they deserve for having worked through the system, up through the trenches. Now I'm on my soapbox, but it's incredible what has happened to the business, and it's happened quickly, like in a short time. And I equate it to like when talkies came in, silent films were like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Right. And within 2 years, that business was gone. It was decimated. The only person still making silent films was Charlie Chaplin because he was Charlie Chaplin. Right. We have to do this now. And it has to be an industry-wide, reckoning.
The person you're talking about, too, is somebody I admire greatly. And she has 2 children and, was away from them for so long making this show for Netflix and also not getting paid for posts, not being able to bring on writers to help. It's just a mess.
We all love what we do,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't get paid to do what we love.
The other thing about editing, Liz, is not just justifying that this is also a form of writing and storytelling. We are unavailable to book other work to be paid to do our jobs if we are in post. So that's just another reason that we should be getting paid while we are doing that work. It's because you're going to pay a holding fee or no? I mean, at least do that and do it at our actual, pay rate.
I mean, the thing is, it's so short-sighted too, because you need a writer in post. You need a writer there in production to do production rewrites, to help guide the director, because, I mean, there's nothing more expensive really than shooting stuff that you end up on the cutting room floor. And if you don't have a writer there to say, shoot this, don't shoot this, do it this way, don't do it that way, then you're not going to have anything usable and your shows are going to suck. So in a way, we're taking this strike, but we're really attempting to save the business and save the companies from themselves, because all this weird penny pinching on writers is just going to produce shows that no one wants to watch. And nobody will subscribe to your streaming service if you have crappy shows that don't make any sense because you are nickel and diming some writer whose creative vision it is and not letting them stay on the show to see it through to the very end.
Absolutely. Zoanne, I want to come back to you real quick, just because one thing that Liz mentioned was that the whole kind of ecosystem of things has changed. The process, the ladder that people climb has changed. I know that you have been with Grays for a very long time at this point, and I think you kind of went through that ladder and you kind of climbed your way up to where you are. How has that process changed kind of in your eyes?
I managed to turn the most unstable job and career into the most stable career you could ever have. It's been on for literally decades. But it's interesting you asked me that, because Tia and I were actually talking earlier about the opposite problem happening, and that people are moving up through the ranks without having any experience whatsoever. Because it made me think of that, Sarah, when you said that, having 4,000 hours of set experience, whereas you have some people who, did 6 weeks in a mini room as a staff writer and then went on to do 6 weeks or 12 weeks in another room as a story editor and moved up through the ranks that way, but were never able to actually go and produce any episodes. And they may get all the way up to executive producer or showrunner in a few years because, they've been going to all of these tiny rooms. So then you get up and you're overwhelmed. You don't know what you're doing. So you have to bring in the experienced people who are going to be supervising you, but of course not being paid for that. And it's just this very broken system that has been created through the streamers and the new way of doing things. I mean, Mine was obviously the very old school way of starting, in the trenches as staff writer. Actually, mine is even way different than most because I'm a lot of you guys were assistants first. Like my assistant job was being a doctor. So I learned a lot on the job, just like there's a lot there. My learning curve became very steep after I realized that in order to like flourish as a writer, I was going to have to be more than a doctor on these shows. So this show. So about like third season, my learning curve started going way up, but there was like a lot I needed to learn, and I did it all like on the job and, going through every single level. I was supervising producer for a few years. I was co-executive producer for a few years. I was like, I don't even need to be executive producer because I don't want to have that title if I have to go out and do anything. And then they were like, here. And I was like, okay. So it was very much the old school climbing process of going through network. But in the meantime, I learned so much that I didn't even know I knew. Because when I was, picked up to go do Station 19, and then I became the leader of that show, all of the things that I had learned over 19 years came out, and I was able to handle the job because I had all of that experience under my belt, which I think that a lot of people are not able to have, even though they are going up through the ranks so quickly and getting those titles.
Last year, I was in 2 rooms. One was a 9-week mini room. The other one was an 8-week mini room. I'm lucky that I've been on shows that I've got to go to set fun in the neighborhood, and that's great learning experience because it's like every week there's a show and you're gonna be there, and there's like a standard to it, right? But I feel like there were so many people in the mini room. Specifically, one of my biggest problems was there was a girl who in the 9-week room was a staff writer. It's her first job. She really needed health insurance and she didn't qualify because she didn't make enough money. And that is insane to me. You can work 9 weeks and not qualify for health insurance because you need to make a certain amount of money, but they're not paying us what we're worth. And not only that, it is impossible, you guys know, to get a job, get a first job, get a second job, get a third. It's so hard. But to get 2 jobs, okay, maybe we know enough people. It just so happens to be that the shows are open at the right time and we can just make all the dots connect. And then maybe we can get a third job in addition to those other 2 jobs, so I can pay for my kid to go to school. And then in addition to that, I can pay for my mortgage, probably a townhouse, guys, because that's what we can really, no matter how much we work. Sarah, help me. So it's the combination of all those kind of crushing factors is not necessarily great for creativity, but also makes a job that we love very dearly impossible because they're just giving us like, have a half a cookie, guys. That's what you get for your work. And it's absurd and insane and impossible.
I have, in the last 7 years, done primarily streaming, and it's been creatively fulfilling in ways that I never. I was pretty burned out from working on procedurals and working in the on some network shows that went through some really tough times. And but what's interesting is that these mini rooms, if people really understand what's going on, they're a way to sort of short circuit the development process so that they're asking people to meet, to create a show, to come up with all the episodes, but they're not greenlighting it to production, which means that if you're a hyphenate like I am, you're not getting producing fees for the work because they found these loopholes to create. It's a kind of a loophole to kind of save money. But what they're doing is shortchanging the process too, because these rooms are too short, right? I've heard of comedies, 10 weeks for 10 episodes. Anyone knows that's virtually impossible. I don't care who you are, especially for a new show that doesn't have a pilot shot, which is usually what you go to help everyone. All the writers have to be on the same page. They have to see and hear and be in the same world of the same show in order to keep generating stories. Without a pilot, without a cast, you're asking a lot of people to come together. And that takes a lot of deep work and psychological discussions about the characters. I'm in a greenlit. Okay, the show I'm now on for Amazon right now had a mini room. That room now has a greenlit room, not greenlit to production. We are almost greenlit to production. We had 20 weeks. They wanted all 8 episodes written. We didn't get there. Obviously, we couldn't. It's such a dense, character-driven show. It's every single character has a storyline, right? It's so much work. And I don't know that there's a full understanding. I think our executives do. The ones that we're working with really understand the work we're doing, and they're very appreciative of it. But I think the expectation above them is that why weren't 8 episodes delivered? Well, it's not Chat GPT, and that would just be generic crap. We're doing really intensive work. So we turned in 2 full scripts, a story area for 3, and then a full format, which means we broke out the whole season. There's a tremendous amount of work to do, and we didn't make 20 weeks because we had the strike. And I feel very strongly that the work we did really was extraordinary. But we were working weekends and nights for less money. The showrunner is making minimum on this show, and she's the showrunner. This is her cherry on the top of the sundae of her entire career. And it's unsustainable.
They want the material good and fast. And that's not possible. That's not how it works. You can have it fast or you can have it good. I was in a mini room for an upcoming season on a show, and it was just me and one other person, and they were paying me minimums. And my baby was new. He was 8 weeks new, little. And I said, okay, I won't take my maternity leave yet, but I won't work weekends. And an executive called my agent and asked what other projects I must be working on to fill my time. How dare I say I won't work weekends? And I was like, that project is a baby. The baby you knew I have. You called my agent? Like, what? Just a bad experience. But it's like an inability to compute that great things take time. They just take time, and you got to pay us. It's not hard to understand. They just don't want to.
I mean, look at shows like Succession and The Bear and these shows that are so, like, there's so many. I could just rattle them off.
It really is. You guys are doing just the absolute most. And just first of all, just as like a TV viewer, thank you for creating the content. That's probably a weird spot for me to jump in earlier and say bless you, but like, just for the record, just like this is me letting my TV viewer side peek through. Watching an ensemble show where I don't care about every member of the ensemble, where every character doesn't have that story arc, it is infuriating to me. So that's just quick aside. Just like too.
Yeah. I realized how different the business was when I worked on Man in the High Castle. And that show was so extraordinarily hard because you had history, alternate history, sci-fi, you had character work, you had action, there were so many different elements that were at play. There was one writer on staff who was a screenwriter, and he's a little bit older. He was the one that could just deliver a fully realized script because he was just that guy who could do all those different things. But what we're being asked to do is feature writing in very condensed periods of time, and it's not the same. It's not like doing, when I was doing Law and Order Criminal Intent. I mean, that is a very strict procedural with a very, very finite structure, right? And you learn the format and you plug in things, and that's what that show is. That's a different model. This is like all bets are off. Every episode of Succession is different, right? There's not a formula. They tell the story the way they have to tell that episode. And we're being asked to whittle our time down into these tiny little slots and come up with gold for them to make billions off.
Well, and one thing I kind of want to dig in on a little bit more in that is, one, the pressure creatively. They want your best and they want it very quickly. I would also very much be interested in getting into kind of like the decision making just in terms of your personal life. So I know, Tia, that something that you mentioned was like, you said, okay, like I'll do it. I won't go on maternity leave, but I won't work weekends. Sarah, I'm curious from your perspective, like what kind of decisions have you had to make kind of in your careers in terms of like balancing your family, wanting to be around, wanting to do these things? Like, does it impact jobs that you have taken or maybe not taken? Like, how do you kind of navigate that? That seems just stressful on top of stressful.
Kristen's laughing because I think I've helped my husband sell half this panel house. My husband's a real estate agent. And I come from a real estate family and Massachusetts investors. So when I first got staffed, I parlayed my money into real estate here in Los Angeles, and has helped me survive the crisis that is the writing industry right now. I also it doesn't pay well, but I do a lot of work with nonprofits. I do it more out of my heart and experience, but I do a lot of sort of copywriting and then producing for like Moms Demand Action Against Guns and a domestic violence safe house and organ procurement organization. But I mean, COVID was nuts. Like everything was moving to Zoom. I got like 3 meetings in a row, and one of them, my children were running back and forth naked behind me. And the showrunner was like, "What are you going to do about childcare?" And I was like, "Huh? Like, what are you talking about? What am I going to do about childcare?" Like, I have no idea. Bubble wrap them and lost my parents. And so so it worked. For them to ask me that, yeah, I've had a couple of people say that. But basically, I've just made ends meet, and I was really lucky earlier this year to, like I said, get an opportunity to do a rewrite on a movie, and it's still not going to be enough to extend my health insurance. So it's like, we're just constantly trying to figure things out, but writers got to write, and so that's what the networks, the studios are banking on. Like, they'll come back to work for the love of writing. It's like, no, we won't. We'll write for someone else. Like, it's just.
I'll chime in on that. Also, just to say, Zoanne's known me a long time, and the decision for me to have a child was not taken lightly. And then I had to work very, very hard to have a child with a surrogate. And at first, I was really quiet about it because, like what Sarah just mentioned, because the fear of not getting jobs or not getting big jobs, or, the million things you worry about being discriminated against for having a child. And when he got older, when I was looking for the job I currently have, I got very loud in speaking to everyone about the fact that I was a new mom, because I thought, that's going to be a problem for you. And it wasn't, God bless them, but I don't want to work with you. Like, if you're not going to give me this job, I'm not going to hide this, because I don't want to be working with people who wouldn't have picked me because I have a child. And so I just got really, really vocal about, like, this. I have a family, and there's going to be space for that in my life. And, like, God bless them, it's been the healthiest balance. Like, they've made a lot of, I have to give props where props are due, like a lot of giving me the space to breathe and be a mom and a person and a showrunner. And it's been awesome.
One thing I wanted to add is that, I think like a lot of writers, like my husband and my 3 kids are on my health insurance. And, we, one of the reasons why this strike is so existential now is because it is very clear that the companies keep reducing staff, reducing the number of writers. It feels like in an ideal world, you'll just have like one showrunner, writer, producer working with 2 computers who are spitting out AI scripts that you end up rewriting. One of the reasons why we're trying so hard to preserve writers' rooms and writers' jobs, which is, by the way, where 75% of the Guild works, is because if we don't have writers coming up after us, if we don't have generations of writers coming up after us, our health insurance will go bankrupt. Like, we need our health insurance needs. We need the studios to contribute health contributions for every writer that gets a job. And so this idea that we can, just get rid of a bunch of writer jobs and get rid of a bunch of writers and just have, whatever, like 500 shows with 500 writers. Well, that's, even for like, I know that, like even showrunners who are on network with 22 episodes or whatever, like we're all going to get old and sick. at some point. And if we don't stop this if we don't work on this existential crisis now, then when we're old and sick, we are not going to have health insurance to pay for anything, pay for us or our families if like anything happens, And so we're screwed if if the trends continue the way they are, where writer jobs are just getting eliminated and writer rooms are getting eliminated, which is where 75% of our field work, then like we're screwed, like health wise, physically, we're screwed.
I'm so grateful for the health plan specifically because my husband currently has a torn ACL and a torn meniscus. Had I not had this plan, I've been in the situation where I don't have health insurance, and it was like $1,500 a month just for me and my family. Now we're on a plan where we can live maybe and breathe, but thank God we have our plan because my husband is walking around on crutches, doing the best he can. I'm picking up all the kids from all the places, striking with them. I mean, we do all the things, right? Like healthcare, I am so grateful that people have struck and negotiated and worked so hard to make our healthcare livable. Like if it was not, I am currently on strike and my husband we would be thousands of dollars in debt because I didn't have insurance.
A lot of what we're striking for is like, we want writing to remain a sustainable career. We are fighting for generations of writers after us, just like the writers before us struck for health insurance and residuals and pension. But the problem is things are so fast now. It's not just a crisis for generations after us. It's like a crisis right now. Crisis for like maybe in a couple years. Yes, it's like somebody will get cancer. Somebody in our families or ourselves, we will get cancer. And like if we don't have writers with jobs who are paying into the health fund, where the studios are contributing into the health fund, we are screwed.
I'm concerned about the shrinking rooms and this talk about AI. I've played around on ChatGPT. It is soulless. It's generic, soulless, generic, middle of the road. It'll come up with the most mediocre ideas. Putting those out in the world, they're going to lose viewership, right? We can rewrite them, but it's missing the thing, the spark that comes from within us. And that's what people connect to. You're not going to get a bear on ChatGPT. You're not going to get beef on ChatGPT.
I can't even bring myself to play with ChatGPT. That thing terrifies me. Truly and honestly,
It made me feel physically sick. I started plugging in things trying to create a show. And what it came back at was so generic. I was like, I understand the thought process behind it, but for what we do, which is so personal, and all these little stories we're telling to each other now, that's what happens in the writer's room, and we use them. And they get infused into the characters, and the characters become real people that you care about and you feel for. And that's what we do. I have a 19-year-old son who has autism, so that's been an expense, right? I have kids with special needs, and then I have a daughter with severe dyslexia. So I had to navigate schools and therapies and all kinds of stuff you don't expect to when you go into parenthood. But, my son was born when I was pregnant during my first season of Criminal Intent, and he's 19.
Like you said, it's not about like rich Hollywood writers just wanting to get richer. Like we have kids, we have to take care of them somehow,
That's, I think, worth pointing out. It is kids plural and kids singular is expensive. One thing I very much want to ask before we go, I think we'll probably wrap on this one. Kristen, I do want to come to you because I think you have the youngest of the bunch with a 15-month-old. Striking takes a lot. You guys are doing so much. You guys are out every day. We are in week 2. We likely still have a ways to go because talks aren't even starting up again until June, if I'm remembering correctly. I know that this has to be hard in terms of scheduling, in terms of just figuring out everything, and you're still at it. So what is it in you that makes you want to keep going, that gives you kind of the drive to stay out there when you have a 15-month-old? Like this is a little.
Yeah, it's wild. I want to spend all my time hanging out with her. I thought before this happened, that's what I thought the strike would be like. Oh, I'm going to hang out with my baby. No, I'm a WGA captain. I'm there every day. For the time that she's not in daycare. So I go because for her. Like, this is what if I'm fighting for her, and this is the way forward.
I could keep talking to you ladies for quite some time on this. You guys are doing great things. You put out great work, and we thank you for it. And I'm rooting for you. And I so appreciate you taking the time to break this down for us today. Guys, thank you for watching this discussion. And I hope that you rewatch it. And I hope that you have taken something from it. Sarah, Yahlin, Zoanne, Tia, Kristen, Liz, and Jess, thank you so much. You are all incredible. And I wish you just the best of luck in absolutely everything.